I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, Wednesday night's Stop Iran rally in Times Square, New York, where an estimated crowd of more than 10,000 people lined both sides of 7th Avenue from 42nd Street 6 blocks south, all there to protest the Iran nuclear deal, which President Obama has spearheaded as a way to prevent Iran from ever developing nuclear weapons. JBS televised the entire rally live so that viewers throughout the United States could hear from the many speakers who urged those in attendance to let their congressional representatives in both the Senate and the House know that they want them to block the proposed accords. We also had the chance to speak to a number of those who were most forceful in their own arguments, and we'd like to share their comments with you now. Alan, you identified yourself as a liberal Democrat, and then you spoke forcefully against this Iran nuclear accord. Alan, I've asked you this before, I want you to address it again. What's in your mind? How could the president, and you've talked to him many times, how could he get it so wrong, in your opinion?
Well, he has a different worldview. I think he has a view of human behavior, that there is no evil, and that he can deal with anybody, and that although this is not a deal that is based exclusively on trust, there's a lot of trust involved. Even the New York Times called it a bet, a roll of the dice, and a deal based on faith. Our security and the security of Israel is too important to be based on a Russian roulette game.
You said something very important, that you really believe the Prime Minister of Israel will never permit Iran to get a nuclear weapon.
That's right.
Are you suggesting that Israel has the capability?
Yes.
You feel it does?
I do. Yes, it does, and it has the will and the determination.
Okay, last question. You've been around a long time, you know how Washington works. Is there any chance at all that the Congress could vote down this accord in such a way that they would also have the votes to override a presidential veto?
It's possible, but I think at the moment it doesn't look likely, but it's possible.
And
Votes
at the same time,
change.
you want them to try?
Well, I want them to think about the bill very hard. I want them to have hearings. I want them to tell the American public what the bill is all about, and I want the American public then to tell them how to vote.
What's your feeling about this Iran nuclear accord?
I hope that Congress will examine it carefully, that it will be reviewed. There are a lot of things we don't know. We learn of secret accords. We learn of other things that are in it, including the much-touted 5-year and 8-year moratoriums, embargoes on conventional weapons sale and missile sales, and it turns out that they can be waived once they're found in compliance, which means by next year, all of these restrictions could be removed. These are things we're just discovering. I hope that there will be a thorough examination and that Congress will then vote, considering what it means for the American people, for the region, for the world.
The President of the United States, President Obama, literally gave away the store to an enemy of the United States, an enemy that has been at war with the United States since 1979, gave away the store without getting a single concession from the Iranian regime. Even if you set aside all of the weapons, the idea that they're on a glide path now to a nuclear weapon which will destabilize the Middle East, imperil the very existence of Israel, and then ultimately the West and the United States. The very fact that he left 4 Americans behind without getting them back either. From top to bottom, Mark, from the existential threat that this deal presents, all the way down to leaving 4 Americans behind, tells me that this president deliberately designed this deal to benefit the Iranians and essentially screw the Israelis and the Americans. From top to bottom, this is the worst thing he has ever done.
The United States of America under Obama just signed a deal with Iran that guarantees that Iran will get a nuclear bomb.
Guarantees it.
Guarantees that they'll have a nuclear bomb. Obama himself said it. He said that at the end of this deal, the breakout time for Iran to get a nuclear bomb is 0, which means that they're getting a bomb. If they abide by this agreement, and if they cheat on this agreement, they'll get a bomb. So there's no scenario under this deal with Iran not emerging as a nuclear-armed country. The second thing is that this deal enriches the largest state sponsor of terrorism to the tune of $150 billion starting. It's been assessed that they're going to end up with $700 billion from this deal in deals that they're going to be able to make in new business opportunities that are opening up for them. So this is enriching the world's greatest state sponsor of terrorism that is fomenting war and mass suffering throughout the Middle East and increasingly throughout the world. And so, it's immoral that what the United States is doing.
Do you think that the Obama administration or the president himself is a bad man? How could he get it so wrong from your perspective?
I think that everybody has to make their own individual judgment about the character of the President of the United States. But if we judge him by his actions, we can see that his presidency is the greatest gift to terrorist organizations probably ever. I mean, the American president has just given Iran $150 billion. That, I think, speaks louder than any question about his character. These are his actions that are talking, and it's a disaster.
What do you think is realistic, Caroline, in terms of what Congress has the power to do? Do you hope at all that, in fact, the Congress, and by the way, it's the Senate and the House, has to reject this accord and be willing to override a veto? Instinctively, do you think that's possible?
I don't know. I'm not going on instincts right now. I'm going on my belief in the American people. And the reason why this rally is taking place today, and the reason why rallies are taking place, rallies like this throughout the United States today, is because it really is the job of the American people to tell their lawmakers that this is what they must do. And I believe that the American people understand what it means to be an American, and they understand that giving bombs to the mullahs in Iran who call for the destruction of the United States of America every single day, and gives those same people $150 billion to finance terrorism, I think that the American people understand that that is fundamentally un-American, and they will make their voices heard.
Last question. As an Israeli, you heard Alan Dershowitz speak before you, and he sort of said under no circumstance will Israel permit Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. From your perspective, does Israel have the military power to go against Iran on this issue without the United States?
Look, I mean, I can only go by what the IDF says, the Israeli military says, and our defense minister says, which is that, yes, we do.
I'm standing now with an individual who's made an extraordinary contribution to Jewish life, Jerry Levin, in a host of Jewish organizations. Jerry, what brings you to this rally?
Well, in my lifetime, I don't think there's been a moment that is more important for the Jewish community to get together, which is always a challenge, to support the Stop Iran issue. I represent the UJA Federation of New York. We're the largest provider of social services. Politics is not really our thing, but for this, I think we have to come out and stand united.
There are some people who have said it's too bad that when the rally was announced, all the organizations that were listed, among them, there was a striking absence. ADL wasn't there, AJC wasn't there, UJA Federation was not there, the President's Conference was not there. And I want you to speak to that. To what extent are you concerned that this is like, I don't know, some kind of, within the Jewish world, a counter-culture movement?
There's a long explanation to that. I'll admit, I've been working with both sides on this issue. There are people who are for this rally and there are people against this rally. It's important for those on the right to understand that this decision, the ability to change it, is actually going to be dictated by the left. And people on the left were concerned that this rally was going to be very much anti-administration, anti-democratic. It's not. We all have the same goal, which is to stop this bill, stop this agreement, kill it. We're just coming at it from different perspectives. And I can assure you the people here who have been speaking are totally Israel focused. They're not focused on we're right, you're wrong. We've got to get this bifurcated Jewish community together or we're going to self-destruct. That is my concern, that we will lose because we're too busy fighting with each other than getting together on this issue.
What a pleasure I have now standing with a great American, somebody who's given years and years of service to this country in a whole host of different positions, including head of the CIA, James Woolsey, who just spoke. You were fabulous up on that stage.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
You identified yourself as somebody who comes out of the Democratic Party, the Democratic...
Scoop Jackson, Joe Lieberman wing of the Democratic Party. There aren't too many of us anymore.
So I'm asking you, when you look at this administration and its enthusiasm for this deal, what do you think is behind it? These are not bad people. How can they be so wrong?
I think the president thinks of him and the Iranians and maybe a bunch of others as if they're all members of the Chicago City Council. And there's a basic agreement that although we may disagree on things and we may even get mad occasionally, we're going to have to work together, so we work things out. And after we've worked a little bit together, maybe I take an opportunity to do a bit of a favor for you. Because I think, you know, in a month or so, I'll be able to maybe get him to do something for me. And that's kind of the basis on which we work together. It's a basis probably on which the Chicago City Council works together. It's not the basis you can work on when one member of your group is a theocratic, totalitarian, genocidal imperialist.
You were many years inside the halls of government. You were in the CIA. What about all the people who are the pros, the professional diplomats? Why aren't they saying to him what you just said?
I don't know. I don't know.
What's it mean?
I don't know how many of them get to see him. I don't know how they run things. It could be very different. He may be working very, very closely with a very few people. I just don't know.
Okay. You know, the president's position is we're going to have such a close look at everything they do in the next 10 years or so that we'll know if they cheat. They can't cheat, he tells us, and that we will have such information that even when the 10 years or the 12 years or the 15 years comes to an end, they will be in a worse position to go nuclear in terms of a weapon than they are today. Does that in any way persuade you?
No.
Because why?
I think that they are going to secretly be enriching uranium. They don't need big facilities to do that as long as they're only focused on getting 1 or 2 or 3 weapons. And that's all they need, and they're a nuclear power. Or they could launch one into orbit and have it blast in orbit, and that would, if they detonated over the United States, it could take out a big share of our electric grid with an electromagnetic pulse. So whether it's to intimidate other countries, whether it's to throw their weight around, whether it's to actually launch something like that at us, they don't need a whole battery of nuclear weapons. 3 or 4 would probably do fine, and they could have a very small space in which they are extracting and enriching the uranium necessary for that sort of undertaking.
So instinctively, do you feel Israel has the capability on its own to either impede or eliminate Iran's nuclear weapons capability?
Well, certainly Israel could do that if it used nuclear weapons. But if it did not use nuclear weapons, it would be very difficult for some of the facilities. Some of them they could deal with very well, but others would be tough. Fodor, for example, in the middle of the mountain. They need a very special penetrating weapon to deal with something like that. So they could do a very substantial damage. And they don't really need to or want to do only the nuclear facilities. They would, if they went after Iran, want to undertake a strike on everything related to the Revolutionary Guard, which is the real instrument of power in Iran. But to take out all of Iran's nuclear installations, that'd be very hard given the way Iran has put them together.
When you were at the CIA and other positions of government, were you ever frustrated?
Frustrated? Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So in terms of your understanding of how Washington works, is there any chance that Congress now could muster enough votes to block the Iran nuclear accord, or, if necessary, to override a presidential veto?
Well, they need 2/3 in each house because of the way Obama has put this up in order to get away from the requirement of it being a treaty. And I'd say they've got a fighting chance. And if they win, that is, if we win, if we reject the agreement, it will be a real legislative triumph.
Congress should not be influenced by the United Nations vote that took place in the Security Council on Monday. That the United States Congress has promised 60 days to look into every detail and examine what was put together in this agreement. So in order they should not ratify something or not pass something that it is not solid, that is not bulletproof, so to speak, regarding the agreement, regarding the ability of Iran to become a threshold nuclear state. And I think it's really crucial for us to make a statement now to the Congress, stand strong, stand steadfast, look into it carefully, examine it carefully, and do not allow something that is dangerous to potentially put Israel, the Middle East, and Europe and beyond in danger.
I mean, look, Iran is the world's biggest state sponsor of terrorism. I know people have already said, well, how is Iran going to attack America? They don't have intercontinental missiles. Look, it was only last week we commemorated the Armia bombing in Buenos Aires, which Iran was charged for. So with Iran, a state sponsor of terrorism with nuclear weapons, it won the threat of terrorism. Secondly, to live in a world of nuclear blackmail with Iran, the mullahs of Iran with their hand on that trigger, it blurs the lines between what we could be in fighting evil.
As we look at what seems to be the spread of Islamic jihadist ideology and terror, as somebody who is a member of the Islamic faith, how do you look at the way in which your community has responded to the extremism in the Muslim world?
Not well enough. We're denying it. We're going, this has nothing to do with Islam. We're almost washing our hands of responsibility. And too many people in positions of power are allowing us to. This is a cancer which ultimately has killed more Muslims than anyone else. And until we stand up and go, this is wrong, this is a problem from our community, and we have to defeat it, we're going to have problems. We're not going to be able to rid ourselves of it.
The first time you and I spoke, it was when you were first making your presence felt in the Jewish world. I asked you then, how does the Muslim world treat you? Are you afraid? Do you ever have to worry for your own safety? And in general, how have you experienced the Islamic community now that you take such a pro-Israel stand?
It's been interesting because there is still the hostility, there is still the same kind of people attacking me, but I've also seen many voices, especially in the last few years, who are sick of the extremism, who want to look at a different way, and that gives me hope. Am I afraid for my safety? No, you know what can you do? You can get hit by a bus, it's New York, so.
You understand the point of this rally?
Absolutely.
There is a sentiment here, certainly among those who put it together, and many of the 10,000 who are here today, that we want to get the Congress of the United States, Senate and the House, to basically vote no on the Iran nuclear accord. There are many people who are saying that that is not politically feasible. It may be the right sentiment to have, but in realpolitik, it's a done deal. Now, you have been in the halls of government, albeit in Canada. I first want to ask you, to what extent do you think it's realistic that there is still an opportunity to move Congress to vote against the accord and to have enough votes in the American Congress to override a presidential veto? What's your instinct on that?
Well, my instinct is, I say as a parliamentarian, that very often parties follow the leader of their party, and that's why many Democrats may feel obliged to follow Obama's lead. But at the same time, parliamentarians, and this is true of people in Congress, have an open mind and must have an open mind, and therefore have got to consider the facts, the consequences, the future. And I think that when we look at this agreement, and one thing that we have not really looked at enough, and that is while the P5+1 negotiations were going on, they were not overshadowing, not only overshadowing, but sanitizing the massive domestic repression in Iran. Iran, which was executing more people per capita than any other country in the world before the negotiations, has actually intensified those executions. In addition, they've escalated their domestic repression, the criminalization of dissent, the prosecution and persecution of ethnic and religious minorities, particularly the Baha'i, over 1,000 political prisoners. I can go on. The reason I say this is because the Iranian leaders have been lying about the fact that they've been engaged in this repression. They've said there's been no repression of dissent. If they can lie so openly about what is so clearly, by all evidentiary, indicate a massive domestic repression, what does this say about the validity, let alone the veracity, of any of their undertakings regarding the nuclear agreement? And so I think Congress people have got to look at the overall situation, not only the Iranian nuclear threat, but the terrorist threat, the hegemonic threat, the incitement threat, and in particular the massive domestic repression. In other words, the five-fold threat that Iran represents. And if you look at it through this five-fold looking glass, I think that Congress people will say, hey, maybe we better look at this deal and say, can we really authorize it? Because at the end of the day, it will not only be Iran as a threshold nuclear state, but Iran as a threshold nuclear domestic repression nuclear state. That we cannot abide by.
It concerns me, and I'm just talking to you now, it concerns me that the discussion on the American scene, everywhere you look, whether it's at this rally or certainly when the administration talks about the deal, there is no nuance to it. There's no subtlety to it. There's no discussion of the vast repercussions, and nobody is forcing the president to address this. Why is that? And, you know, as you answer that question, I want to throw one more into you. You know these people. It's hard for me to believe they're bad people. They have a vision. They think they're doing the right thing. How can they be so mistaken from your perspective? So talk about how we discuss it in America, and why, and do you think the president has in his heart the best of motives and is just mistaken?
Look, you can be very well-intentioned, but it can lead to very adverse consequences. It can be a present-day version of the March of Folly. This can be another March of Folly, and that's why Congress has got to take a serious look. When President Obama says that those who are opposing it are those who wanted to support the war in Iraq, that those who are opposing it are those that would oppose any diplomacy. Well, let me say, I oppose the war in Iraq. I'm in support of diplomacy. I was in support of this initial diplomatic encounter with Iran, but I cannot support this particular diplomatic
because
it makes all the things that Obama says, and I want to take him at his word, that he cares about and wants to achieve. It makes all those things harder to achieve, and in fact makes a lot of things that he may not be addressing. As I said, the massive domestic repression, just one of them, making those things worse.
He tells us, Irwin, that this deal will give us more insight into the nuclear program that Iran has, will stop it from developing nuclear waste that would be used for a nuclear weapon. that 10 years from now we will know much more than we do now and be in a better position to stop Iran, which still will be a signer of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that therefore this deal, he tells us, will in fact prevent Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. What would you want to ask him, or what would you say in response?
I would say, I'd like to believe you, but I have also heard what President Rouhani has said. And he said that the Americans initially only wanted us to have 300 centrifuges. We now have 6,000. They didn't want us to maintain our nuclear infrastructure. We're maintaining our nuclear infrastructure. They wanted to have inspections anytime, anywhere. Well, there are not going to be any inspections anytime, anywhere. So I just listened to what Rouhani is saying. He is the best proof of the fact that all of the U.S. red lines have been violated, and all the red lines of Rouhani, by their own acknowledgement, the Iranians' own acknowledgement, have been secured. That's what worries me.
So here you are at this rally, and you just spoke. People loved you. I simply want to know, as simply as you can put it, why are you against this deal, which the President of the United States tells us, in the long run, will prevent Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon, because we're going to have verification in ways that we have never had before. They're going to be limited on the amount of nuclear materials they can work with. They're going to limit the number of centrifuges. And 10 years or 12 years or 15 years from now, we will know more about their program and be able to stop anything. And if they cheat, we will, quote, snap back sanctions. So why is Richard Kemp against this deal?
None of that makes any sense. None of it is realistic. None of it is true. The reality is that this deal has made the likelihood of war far greater in the Middle East and in the world. Because what's happened now is Iran has been shown weakness by the West, weakness by America, weakness by the P5+1. And Iran will take advantage of that weakness. Iran will develop a nuclear bomb unless it's stopped from doing so. And if Iran develops a nuclear bomb, Iran will use that nuclear bomb. Its first target is Israel. Its subsequent targets are other places in the region, and include the United States as well. This deal is a travesty, it's a disgrace, and it's going to lead to war.
Now, it was supported by the P5. This includes your country. So what is Great Britain thinking that it's going along with it?
Great Britain is standing in unity with the United States of America, as it does so often. I can only imagine that that is the reason why our government has agreed to sign up to this deal, because it's standing beside their great allies, the US. Unfortunately, in this case, the US is acting in a very misguided and dangerous way.
There's a saying, Richard, if people tell you you're drunk and you don't think you are drunk, but everybody tells you, at least sit down. Everybody is saying that, lo and behold, this is a good deal. Are they all wrong?
Anybody who says this is a good deal is wrong. They don't understand the deal. They don't understand the reality of Iran. They think Iran thinks the way we think. Iran doesn't think like we think. We don't understand the way Iran thinks. Iran is going to exploit this deal.
Richard, thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Kemp.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.